At 7:30 hours, the human stretched her arms overhead, and by lunch, the cubs had weaponized flexibility. Look, I need you to understand something about my job. I'm the station wellness director for Cravathi Outpost Epsilon. That means I handle everything from nutrition plans to sleep cycle optimization for 300 personnel and their families. It's a good position. Stable, boring in the best possible way. Then Devon arrived. The requisition form said we were getting a human physical therapist to help with our aging population's joint issues. Simple enough. Humans were supposed to be good at that sort of thing, what with their obsession with maintaining their frankly absurd bipedal stance well into their elder years. I approved it without much thought. Devon showed up on a Tuesday. Transport with 2 bags and a roll-it-up mat made of some kind of foam composite. She was average height for a human. Female, dark hair pulled back in what I later learned was called a ponytail, and she had this unsettling habit of smiling at everyone she met, not the polite mandible click we use for greetings, an actual baring of teeth that somehow didn't read as threatening. I should have known right then that everything was about to go sideways. Her first week was fine, normal even. She set up her therapy room in Medical Bay 3, organized her equipment, learned everyone's names with frankly unsettling speed. The elderly staff loved her. She had gentle paws, hands, I mean hands. The translator still glitches on human anatomy terms. The problem started when she decided to use the recreation bay for her morning routine. I was doing my usual rounds when I first saw it. The recreation bay is a large, open space where off-duty personnel can exercise. The cubs can play that sort of thing. It was 07:30 and Devon was in there alone on her mat, moving. Except moving doesn't really capture what I was watching. She bent herself in half, just folded forward at the waist until her torso was pressed against her legs, arms dangling toward the floor. Then she straightened, raised her arms overhead, and bent backward into an arc that should have required at least 2 additional vertebrae. I pulled up her medical file on my data pad. Standard human skeletal structure. Nothing unusual, which made what I was watching impossible according to every Cravathi physiology text I'd ever read. She dropped to all 4s. No, all 3s. She had one leg extended behind her, arms planted on the ground, pushing her chest toward the floor while her rear end stayed elevated, her spine curved in 3 different directions simultaneously. Is she injured? Vormek's voice crackled through my comm. He was head of station security and had apparently also noticed our human doing whatever this was. I don't think so, I said slowly. Her vital signs are steady. Heart rate is actually decreasing. She looks like she's preparing to pounce. He wasn't wrong. The position would have been an excellent pre-attack stance for a Cravathi. Low center of gravity. Weight distributed for explosive forward movement, spine coiled for power generation. Except Devon's eyes were closed and her breathing was so slow I could count the seconds between inhales. That's when I noticed the cubs. 16 of them, ranging in age from 4 to 8. Cycles pressed against the observation window. Every single one was utterly transfixed. Now Cravathi cubs are curious by nature. It's part of our predator heritage. But this was different. They weren't just watching, they were studying. I could see their little claws flexing their tails twitching and unconscious. Mimicry of Devon's movements. Should I intervene? Vormik asked. No, I said, though I wasn't sure why. Let's just observe. Devon flowed into a new position. She planted her hands and feet on the ground, pushed her hips toward the ceiling, and held herself in an inverted V shape that made my own spine ache just looking at it. She held it there for 30 seconds, a minute. Her arms didn't even tremble. The smallest cub, maybe 4 cycles old, made a soft chirping sound. It was the noise young Cravathi make when they're trying to understand something that doesn't fit their developing worldview. Devon finished whatever she was doing with a sequence that involved sitting on the ground, pulling one foot up to rest against her inner thigh and folding forward over the extended leg. Then she stood, rolled up her mat, and walked out of the recreation bay with that same unsettling tooth-bearing smile. The cubs immediately swarmed into the space she'd vacated. Vormik, I said quietly, are you still watching this? Yes, director. Good, keep recording. The lead cub, an 8-cycle-old, named. Actually, I'm not going to tell you their names. It'll just make what happens later more complicated. The lead cub stood in the center of the space and dropped into a 4-legged stance. Then it tried to replicate Devon's forward fold. You have to understand, Cravathi are quadrupedal. Our spines are designed for horizontal orientation. We can rear up on our hind legs for short periods, but it's not our natural state. What this cub was trying to do was bend a body designed for running down prey on all fours into a shape meant for a vertical skeleton. It shouldn't have worked. The cub's spine curved. Its hindquarters stayed planted while its upper body folded down and forward, 4 legs extending until its snout nearly touched the ground between its front paws. The position was completely wrong for Cravathi anatomy. The angle was impossible. The muscle engagement made no sense. The cub held it for 5 seconds and didn't collapse. Did you see that? Vormik's voice had gone up half an octave. I saw it. Should I stop them? On what grounds? They're playing cubs play, except this wasn't playing. Not really. The other cubs were lining up, each attempting the same position. Most couldn't hold it for more than a second or two. A few couldn't achieve the shape at all. But 3 of them managed it, and 1 held the position for a full 10 seconds. They were teaching themselves. I filed the incident in my daily report and flagged it for review, but I didn't think much more about it. Cubs are resilient, flexible. It made sense they could contort themselves in ways adults couldn't, probably harmless. I was an idiot. The next morning, Devon was back in the recreation bay at 07:30. Same mat, same routine, and this time she had an audience from the start. All 16 cubs sat in a semicircle around her space, perfectly silent, watching her every movement with an intensity usually reserved for hunting lessons. Devon noticed them. I saw her pause, smile, that disturbing smile, and wave. Then she started her routine. She moved through the same sequence as before, but this time I actually paid attention to the structure of it. There was a pattern. Each position flowed into the next with deliberate purpose. She would hold a shape, breathe slowly, then transition smoothly into the next configuration. When she finished, she walked over to the cubs. I increased audio pickup. Good morning, Devon said cheerfully. Were you watching me exercise? The cubs made various chirping and clicking sounds. The universal language of young beings trying to communicate with an adult they're not quite sure about yet. Do you want to try some stretches, Devon asked. Oh no, the cubs chittered excitedly. Devon laughed, a human sound that translates poorly through mandibles. Okay, here's an easy one. It's called cat-cow, which is funny because you actually look more like cats than I do. She dropped to all fours. Finally, a position that made sense for her body. She arched her spine upward into a curve, tucked her head down, then reversed it, dropping her belly toward the ground and lifting her head. See, you curve your back up, then down. Nice and slow, it feels good on your spine. The cubs attempted to copy her. This should have been easy for them. It was a natural position, utilizing their actual skeletal structure. But I watched as every single one of them tried to exaggerate the movement to match Devon's range of motion. Cavathei spines don't curve that way. We have limited flexibility in our vertebrae. It's a trade-off for the stability we need to take down large prey. The cub's spines curved anyway. Not much, maybe an extra 10 degrees of flexion beyond what should have been possible. But it was there, visible, measurable. Very good. Devon's voice was warm with approval. Now try this one. She demonstrated another position. The cubs copied, then another and another. By the time Devon finished her session, the cubs had learned 6 different stretches, and every single one pushed their bodies into configurations that shouldn't have been achievable with Cavathei physiology. I scheduled a meeting with Devon for that afternoon. She showed up at my office right on time, still smiling. It was starting to become less unsettling and more just annoying. Please sit, I gestured to the chair. Designed for bipedal visitors, thanks. She settled into it with that fluid ease humans had. Is something wrong? I want to talk about your morning activity in the recreation bay, my yoga. She tilted her head slightly. Is there a problem? I checked the schedule. That time slot was open. Yoga, I repeated. The translator had just rendered it as deliberate body positioning for wellness purposes, which seemed inadequate. Is that what you call it? Yeah, it's a human practice, thousands of years old. Combines physical poses, breathing techniques, and meditation. Great for flexibility, strength, and stress relief. I see, and you're aware that the cubs have been watching you. Oh, they're so sweet. Devon's face did something that I think indicated happiness. This morning they joined in. I kept it really simple, just basic stretches. Devon, Cavathei cubs aren't built like human children, I know. That's why I modified everything. I made sure they were only doing poses appropriate for quadrupeds. Appropriate, I said slowly. Can you define appropriate? Nothing that would strain their joints or overextend their muscles. I've been reading up on Cavathei physiology. Fascinating stuff. Your musculature is incredible. Did you know your hindquarter strength ratio is almost 3 times that of Earth predators in the same size class? Devon, I try to keep my voice level. The cubs are bending in ways that exceed normal Cavathei flexibility parameters. She blinked. Is that bad? I don't know. That's the problem. Oh, she was quiet for a moment. Should I stop? I pulled up the morning's footage on my display and rotated it toward her. Watch this. Tell me what you see. The video showed the lead cub performing Devon's cat-cow movement, the spine curved up then down, exceeding the normal range by a clearly visible margin. That's really good form, Devon said. I'm impressed they picked it up so quickly. Their spine is curving 15 degrees beyond species standard. Is that a lot, Devon? Imagine if a human child's elbow suddenly bent backward. Her face did something complicated. That's not the same thing, isn't it? Flexibility can be trained. Human children can be incredibly flexible if they practice. It's not harmful, it's actually beneficial. Greater range of motion, better joint health, reduced injury risk. For humans, for most species with articulated joints and muscle-based movement systems, she leaned forward. Crystal, I would never do anything to hurt the cubs. If you want me to stop, I'll stop, but from a physiological standpoint, what they're doing is just gentle stretching. I wanted to argue, I wanted to tell her that Kavathi weren't meant to stretch, that our bodies were perfectly designed as they were, that changing us was wrong somehow. But she was the expert, she had credentials, she knew anatomy, and the cubs hadn't shown any signs of pain or injury. Continue, I said finally, but I'll be monitoring daily. Fair enough. She stood to leave then. Paused. For what it's worth, I think it's really positive that they're interested in physical wellness at such a young age. Most human kids have to be bribed to exercise. After she left, I sat at my desk and watched the video 3 more times. There was something about the way the cubs moved, something I couldn't quite articulate. They weren't just copying Devon's stretches, they were analyzing them, adapting them, improving them for their own bodies. I filed an updated report and flagged it as priority. Then I went to bed and tried not to think about it. The next morning, I was in the recreation bay at 7:25, 5 minutes before Devon was scheduled to arrive. The cubs were already there, all 16 of them, arranged in 4 rows of 4, performing a synchronized routine of the stretches Devon had taught them. Without her, without any adult supervision, they moved through the sequence with precision: up curve, down curve, side bend, shoulder rotation. Each position held for exactly the same duration Devon had demonstrated. Then they did something new. The lead cub dropped into a crouch, then explosively extended its spine upward while pushing off with its hind legs, achieving a height that should have required at least 2 more cycles of muscle development. It landed, rolled forward, and came up in a ready stance. The other cubs chittered excitedly. The lead cub repeated the movement, slower this time, breaking it down into components: crouch, gather, extend, push, roll, rise. They were teaching each other. Devon walked in at 07:30, saw the cubs, and stopped. Oh, good morning, everyone. The cubs turned to face her. As one silent, waiting. Did you practice the stretches I showed you? Devon asked. The lead cub chirped once. Then it demonstrated the explosive extension movement again. Devon's face went very still. That's not one of mine, the cub chirped again, then dropped into the starting position of Devon's cat-cow stretch, but instead of simply arching its back, it added a twist, rotating its upper body 30 degrees while keeping its hindquarters planted. The position looked wrong, unnatural, impossible. The cub held it for 10 seconds without shaking. That's Devon trailed off. How did you? Every cub dropped into the same position, 16 small bodies twisted into the same impossible shape. Devon looked up at the observation window where I was standing. Even through the glass I could see she'd stopped smiling. I was in Devon's therapy room within 5 minutes of that morning's session ending. "They're modifying the movements," she said before I could speak. She was pacing, which humans apparently did when stressed. I showed them basic stretches, gentle, therapeutic movements. They're turning them into something else. What else? I don't know. She stopped pacing. Combat applications, maybe. That twist hold position distributes weight for maximum stability while maintaining rotational mobility. It's brilliant. Actually, for their body structure. Brilliant, I repeated flatly. I didn't teach them that. I know you didn't. I watched the whole thing. I pulled up my data pad. Medical wants to run scans on the cubs with parental permission. Obviously. Good idea. Devon sat down heavily in her chair. I just don't understand how they're doing this. Create flexibility. Parameters are well documented. They shouldn't be able to achieve these positions. And yet she agreed. The scans took 3 days to schedule. Kathy, parents are protective, understandably, and convincing them to let medical poke at their cubs required delicate negotiation. I may have implied it was routine developmental screening. Pelnix ran the scans personally. She was our xenophysiology expert, 3 decades of experience, published more papers than I'd ever read. If anyone could explain what was happening, it would be her. I stood in the observation room while she worked through the first cub, full body scan, joint mobility assessment, muscle density analysis. The cub cooperated perfectly, even seemed excited to show off its new abilities. Pelnix had it demonstrate the twist hold position while the scanners mapped every bone, muscle, and tendon. When the results compiled, Pelnix went very quiet. "Director," she said carefully, "could you come look at this?" I joined her at the display. The cub's skeletal structure rotated slowly in 3-dimensional space, overlaid with muscle groups and connective tissue. "This is the baseline Cravati juvenile structure," Pelnix said, pulling up a comparison. "Standard development for an 8-cycle-old." The images looked identical. Now watch what happens when this cub performs the human stretch. She played the scan footage. Skeleton moved into the twist position. And as it did, I saw something impossible. The spaces between vertebrae expanded. Not by much, fractions of a degree, but consistently, systematically, allowing rotation that shouldn't exist. The connective tissue is adapting. Pelnix said quietly. In real time, the cubs' bodies are responding to the new movement patterns by increasing flexibility in the exact locations needed to achieve the positions. That's not how physiology works, I know. Bodies don't just adapt in 3 days, I know. So what am I looking at? Pelnix zoomed in on a spinal segment. This is going to sound absurd, but the cubs appear to be in an accelerated development phase. Juvenile Crathy have higher tissue plasticity than adults. It's why they heal faster, why they can learn new motor patterns more easily. What the human has done accidentally is trigger an adaptive response by teaching them to stretch, by teaching them to move in ways their bodies desperately want to move but never had reason to before. Pelnix pulled up another scan. This cub has increased spinal flexibility by 40%. This one shows enhanced shoulder rotation. This one has developed stabilizer muscles in its core that don't typically engage until adolescence. Is it harmful? That's the strangest part. No, if anything, there. Healthier, better posture improved. Coordination, reduced joint stress. Human was right, this is beneficial. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt a creeping sense of dread. What happens when they keep progressing? Pelnix didn't answer immediately. I ran projections based on current development rates. If they continue at this pace, within 2 lunar cycles, these cubs will have greater flexibility and body control than any adult Creathian. Documented history from stretching, from very specific stretching performed consistently during a critical development window. She closed the scans. Director, the human didn't just teach them exercises, she's fundamentally altering their physical capabilities. That afternoon, Vormik requested an urgent meeting. I found him in security Bay 1, surrounded by monitors showing various angles of the recreation area. We have a problem, he said without preamble. More problems. He played footage from the previous night. Time stamp showed 2100 hours, well past cub sleep schedules, but there they were, all 16 of them in the recreation bay, practicing. They're supposed to be in family quarters, I said. They are, according to door logs. None of them left their living spaces. Then how? Vormik zoomed in on one section of footage. Watch the ventilation grate. A small body squeezed through the grate opening, then another and another. Cubs poured out of the ventilation system like water, dropping silently to the recreation bay floor. The grates are 14 cm wide, Vormik said. Cubs average 20 cm across the chest. I stared at the screen. They compressed their rib cages. Then they practiced for 2 hours, synchronized their routines, and returned through the vents before dawn. He switched to another angle. Director, they're coordinating. Planning, they have a formation structure. Watch. The footage showed the cubs arranging themselves in a diamond pattern. The lead cub at the front, strongest cubs at the cardinal points, youngest protected. In the center, they moved through their routine in perfect unison. That's a hunting formation, I said. Slowly, modified for stationary defense. I know what it is. Vormik's voice was tight. What I don't know is why cubs are spontaneously developing tactical awareness from yoga. By the end of the 2nd week, I stopped pretending this was normal. The cubs had progressed beyond anything Pelnix's projections predicted. They could compress their bodies to fit through spaces half their size. They could rotate their spines 120 degrees while maintaining a stable stance. They moved with a fluidity that made adult Creati look clumsy by comparison. And they had started naming things. I discovered this during my morning observation. The lead cub stood before the others, demonstrating a sequence. After each position, it would make a specific vocalization, sharp, distinct sounds that the other cubs would repeat back. I activated the translation matrix. Though I didn't expect much, cubs developed language slowly, and these vocalizations were too structured, too deliberate for typical juvenile communication. The matrix flagged them as non-standard. Creathi linguistic patterns created terminology, new words. The cubs had invented a vocabulary for what they were doing. Vormik, I said into my comm, tell me. You're recording this. Every second, director, you need to see what they do next. The lead cub moved into a low crouch, then exploded upward in a spinning motion, all four legs leaving the ground. Simultaneously, it rotated completely in midair, landed, facing the opposite direction, and immediately dropped into a defensive stance. The other cubs chittered excitedly. The lead cub vocalized, Fang Spiral. They had named it. They had named the move they'd invented by combining Devon's hip rotation stretch with their own predator reflexes. That's a combat technique, Vormik said. Unnecessarily. That's an aerial evasion and reposition maneuver. From yoga, I added, because apparently I needed to keep saying it out loud too. Believe it, should I inform the parents? I thought about that, not yet, let me talk to Devon first. I found her in Medical Bay 3 with an elderly patient, carefully manipulating arthritic joints through gentle range of motion exercises. The patient looked relaxed, comfortable. This was what Devon was supposed to be. Doing therapeutic work, healing. I waited until she finished. We need to talk about the cubs. Her smile vanished. What happened? Nothing bad, physiologically speaking, but there I pulled up footage on my data pad and handed it to her. They're doing this. Now she watched the Fang Spiral maneuver 3 times. That's not possible, and yet I showed them downward dog and cat cow and some basic hip stretches. She looked up at me. Where did they learn to do that? From you. Apparently, they've taken your gentle stretches and weaponized them. I'm a physical therapist. I help people recover from injuries. I don't teach combat techniques. I know, but the cubs don't understand the difference. They see positions that maximize body efficiency, and their predator instincts interpret those positions through a tactical lens. Devon sat down slowly. What do you want me to do? I honestly don't know, Pelnik says. They're healthier than ever, Vormik says. They're developing combat capabilities. The parents don't know anything is unusual because cubs are supposed to be energetic and weird, and the cubs themselves are treating this like the most important thing they've ever learned. Maybe I should stop the morning sessions. They practice at night in secret through the ventilation system. Her eyes widened. They what? I showed her that footage. 2. They've become dedicated students. Just not of what you think you're teaching. We sat in silence for a moment. Medical Bay 3 hummed quietly. Around us, all gentle efficiency and healing equipment, the complete opposite of what was happening in the recreation bay. I should talk to them, Devon said. Finally, explain what yoga actually is, that it's not combat training. Worth trying. The next morning, Devon arrived at the recreation bay with visual aids, images of humans doing yoga in peaceful settings, diagrams showing the intended therapeutic purposes of each stretch. She'd even prepared a simple lecture about human wellness practices. The cubs sat in their perfect formation, absolutely silent, and listened to every word. When she finished, the lead cub chirped once and stood. It moved to the center of the space and began demonstrating their routine, not the basic stretches Devon had taught, their version, the enhanced, modified, impossible version they'd developed. After each position, the cub paused and made eye contact with Devon as if seeking confirmation that it was doing the movement correctly. That's very good, Devon said. Carefully, but remember these are stretches for relaxation and health. They're not meant to be combat moves. The lead cub tilted its head. Processing. Then it moved into the twist hold position, the one they'd invented first. It held the stance and vocalized a phrase that translated as stable. Strength waiting. Yes, it's stable, Devon agreed, but you don't need to use it for fighting. You can just hold it to feel the stretch in your spine and shoulders. The cub chirped, dropped the position, and moved into the next pose. A modified version of Devon's warrior stance, except the cub had added a weight distribution that allowed for instantaneous movement in any direction. Ready, flow all paths, it vocalized. Devon looked at me, I looked back. We were both thinking the same thing. The cubs hadn't misunderstood. They understood perfectly. They just understood something Devon hadn't intended to teach. Devon, I said slowly, show them the most relaxing, least combat applicable pose. You know. She thought for a moment, then moved into a seated position, legs crossed, hands resting on knees, spine straight, but relaxed. This is meditation posture. You sit very still and breathe slowly. It's for calming your mind. Every cub immediately copied the position, perfect stillness, controlled breathing. 16 small predators sitting in absolute silence. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it looked like an ambush formation, perfect concealment through motionlessness, breathing controlled to avoid detection. They could hold that position for hours. I realized, waiting, watching. The lead cub vocalized. Silent wait, strike moment. No, Devon said firmly, it's meditation. For peace, for clearing your thoughts. The cubs chittered among themselves. Then the smallest one, the 4-cycle old who'd been first to attempt the stretches, stood and approached Devon. It looked up at her with those large predator eyes and made a soft, questioning sound. Devon knelt down. What is it? The small cub moved through a sequence slowly, each position held longer than necessary, transitions exaggerated so Devon could see every component. It was showing her something, teaching her the way she'd taught them. The sequence was beautiful, fluid, efficient, and absolutely undeniably combat form designed for a quadrupedal predator body. When the cub finished, it looked at Devon expectantly. That's very impressive, Devon said quietly, but I didn't teach you that. The cub chirped and pointed at Devon with one small paw, then it repeated the first movement of the sequence. It was Devon's hip rotation stretch, but condensed, refined, and integrated into something larger. You took my stretch and made it into this, Devon said, understanding dawning. The cub chittered affirmatively, then it pointed at itself and vocalized a phrase that roughly translated as made better for us. Devon looked at me again. They're not copying wrong, they're innovating combat applications from therapeutic exercises. I said, that's what I've been trying to tell you. But I never intended. She trailed off, then laughed. It was not a happy sound. Of course they did. They're predators. I showed them efficient movement patterns, and their instincts filled in the rest. The smallest cub chirped again and patted Devon's hand gently, a reassuring gesture, the kind young beings make when they think an adult is distressed. It's okay, the translator approximated from the cub's vocalizations. Good teaching, we learn good Devon's face did something complicated. "You're welcome," she managed. "That afternoon I received an urgent message. From Station Command, someone had filed a report about unusual activity in the Recreation Bay, someone who apparently had clearance to request a formal investigation." The investigator arrived 2 days later. Military advisor Krathnik, decorated veteran, 3-tour in the border conflicts, now assigned to training evaluation for Cravathi Defense Forces. She was not pleased to be here. "Director Krixt," she said, mandibles clicking with formal courtesy that couldn't quite hide her irritation. "I was told there was unusual activity involving juvenile Cravathi, something that required my expertise." "That's correct. This station is 3 weeks travel from my posting. I hope this is worth my time. I believe it will be." I led her to the observation room overlooking the recreation bay. The Cubs performed their routine at 7:30 daily. "We have 5 minutes," Krathnik said. Nothing but her posture radiated skepticism. At 7:30 exactly, 16 Cubs entered the Recreation Bay in formation. Devon was already there. Matt rolled out preparing for her own routine. She'd insisted on continuing despite everything. "They'll practice anyway," she'd said. "At least this way I can monitor for injuries." The Cubs arranged themselves in their diamond pattern. The lead Cub vocalized a command. In perfect synchronization, they began. I watched Krathnik's expression shift from boredom to interest to shock within the first 30 seconds. The Cubs moved through their sequence with absolute precision. Every position flowed into the next. Every transition served a purpose. Low stances became high guards. Defensive postures reversed into offensive strikes. Flexibility translated to unpredictable attack angles. It was a complete martial system developed from scratch in 2 weeks by children who trained them. Krathnik's voice was barely a whisper. "No one technically. That's a combat form, advanced level." "Where did they learn it?" I pointed at Devon, who was doing a peaceful sun salutation on her mat, completely unaware that the Cubs had stopped their routine and were now incorporating her arm movements into their system. "The human," Krathnik's turned to stare at me. "That's your physical therapist?" "Yes. She's teaching Cubs advanced martial techniques." "No, she's doing yoga. The Cubs are teaching themselves." Krathnik looked back at the Cubs, who had now added Devon's new arm movements to their fang spiral maneuver, creating something that looked like an aerial interception technique. "That's impossible. I have 2 weeks of documentation proving otherwise." We watched in silence as the Cubs completed their routine. When they finished, they bowed to Devon, a gesture of respect they'd invented themselves. Devon bowed back, smiling that uncomfortable human smile. "I need to speak with the human," Krathnik said immediately. "Of course, but there's something you should understand first." "What?" She genuinely has no idea what she's created. The emergency meeting convened in Conference Room 2 at 1400 hours. Present. Myself, Vormik, Pelnix, Krathnik, Devon, and 6 very concerned parents who'd finally been told why their Cubs had become unnaturally flexible. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," said Mevrath, mother of the lead Cub. "My child has been learning combat techniques from a human physical therapist." "Not exactly," I said. "Then explain." Exactly what has been happening. Director, I pulled up the footage all of it, Devon's first morning session. The Cubs' initial attempts there. Nighttime practice runs, the progressive development of what Krathnik had identified as a completely original martial art form. The parents watched in absolute silence. When it finished, Myvreth turned to Devon. You taught my child to compress through ventilation grates. I absolutely did not teach that, Devon said firmly. I showed them basic stretches, gentle exercises for flexibility and wellness. What they did with that information was entirely their own innovation. Innovation, repeated Krathnik. That's an interesting way to describe the development of the most sophisticated juvenile combat system I've seen in 30 years of military service. It's not a combat system, it's yoga. With respect, human, I know combat system. What those Cubs demonstrated is functionally effective, tactically sound, and optimized specifically for juvenile creathy physiology. Krathnik leaned forward. Where did you receive your training? Physical therapy school, University of Washington, Earth. Your combat credentials? I don't have combat credentials. I help people with back pain and post-surgery rehabilitation. Krathnik's mandibles clicked in confusion. You're not military? No, not a martial arts instructor. No, then how did you develop this system? I didn't develop anything. I do yoga. The Cubs watched me, tried to copy my movements with their different body structure, and apparently created something entirely new in the process. One of the other parents, Torvik, spoke up. Are our Cubs in danger? Pelnix, you said they were healthy, but this seems extreme. Pelnix pulled up her medical data. They're not just healthy, they're thriving. Bone density is optimal. Muscle development is ahead of schedule. Flexibility and coordination are unprecedented for their age group. Cognitively, they're problem-solving at adolescent levels. Whatever they're doing, it's beneficial. They're sneaking through ventilation systems at night. Vormik added that's not normal Cub behavior. They're also working as a coordinated unit, looking out for each other and practicing discipline that most adults struggle to maintain. I countered. Strange, yes. Harmful, no. Muat looked at her fellow parents. Some silent communication passing between them. Finally she spoke. We want to see them demonstrate now. They're in education sessions, I said. Pull them out. 20 minutes later, all 16 Cubs stood in the recreation bay with their parents, station command, and one increasingly uncomfortable human watching from the observation room. The lead Cub stepped forward and chirped a question that translated roughly as show everything. Meth clicked her mandibles. Show us what you've learned. What followed was 45 minutes of the most impressive physical demonstration I ever witnessed. The Cubs moved through their entire system, position by position, explaining each one in the vocabulary they'd invented. They showed the therapeutic origins of each movement, then demonstrated the practical applications they'd discovered. Stable strength weighting came from Devon's warrior pose, providing a defensive stance with 360 degrees awareness. Ready flow, all paths emerged from her tree pose, creating a balance point for rapid directional changes. Fang spiral combined her spinal twist with their natural predator reflexes, becoming an aerial evasion technique, and on Every stretch Devon had shown them had been analyzed, adapted, and integrated into a cohesive system that was simultaneously therapeutic exercise and functional martial art. When they finished, the smallest cub approached the observation window and vocalized directly to Devon. "Good teaching, thank you." Devon pressed her hand against the glass. "You're welcome," she said softly, "even though I still don't understand what I taught you." Krathnik stood abruptly. "I need to make a call." To whom? I asked. "Defense Command. If this system is what I think it is, they'll want to know about it." "Absolutely not," Meth said sharply. "These are Cubs' children, not military assets. I'm not suggesting conscription, but this martial art they've developed, it could revolutionize creative combat training." Cubs accidentally discovered something that our best military minds have been trying to develop for decades: enhanced flexibility, improved body awareness, tactical thinking integrate with physical training from early development stages. They learned it from yoga, Devon said, somewhat desperately. "It's supposed to be for relaxation, and they transformed it into something uniquely suited to our physiology." Krathnik turned to the parents. "Your Cubs are innovators, prodigies. What they've created has value beyond this station." The parents looked at each other, at their Cubs, at Devon, who looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. "Let's ask them," Torvik suggested. "Cubs, do you want to keep practicing what you've learned?" 16 enthusiastic chirps filled the recreation bay. "Do you want to teach other Cubs?" The chirps grew louder. The lead Cub added, "Make all Cubs better. Teach good moving." "There's your answer," Emrath said too. "Krathnik, if this becomes anything, it becomes what the Cubs want it to be: a practice, a discipline, not a military program." "Agreed," Krathnik said immediately. "Though I'd like to document the system properly, with your permission, of course." Over the next week we worked out a framework that made everyone moderately uncomfortable, which usually meant it was fair. The Cubs would continue their practice under supervision. Devon would continue her morning yoga, which they could observe and learn from, but she wouldn't provide direct instruction in what they'd created. That was theirs. Krathnik would document the martial art form with the Cubs as primary teachers, preserving their innovations and vocabulary. Parents would monitor for safety, but wouldn't interfere with the Cubs' development of their system. And I would file approximately 17,000 reports explaining how a human physical therapist accidentally revolutionized creative martial arts by doing gentle stretches. Station command required one additional protocol: any human performing movement activities in common areas had to file an activity report detailing the movements, their purpose, and potential for misinterpretation by observers. Devon was not pleased about this. "I have to get permission to stretch?" she asked, reading through the new regulations. "Just documentation for safety." "This is because the Cubs weaponized my sun salutation, isn't it?" "The Cubs created a functional aerial combat system from your sun salutations." "Yes." She dropped her head into her hands. "I help elderly people with arthritis. That's my job. That's all I wanted to do." "You're also now the honored founder of Flexible Fang-style martial arts." "I am not the founder. The Cubs founded it." "The Cubs insist you're the honored founder. They're very adamant about this." "Mevath says it's important too." their sense of structure and lineage. I showed them cat-cow. You showed them efficient movement, patterns that they analyzed through predator instincts and developed into a comprehensive martial system that's now being studied by Defense Command. The Cubs have started a school. 12 more families have enrolled there. Cubs, Krathnik says other stations are requesting information. You've created something significant, even if you didn't mean to. Devon was quiet for a long moment. Can I at least stretch in my quarters without filing reports? Yes. Small mercies. 3 months later, I was doing my evening rounds when I passed the recreation bay. Through the observation window, I could see 50 cubs arranged in perfect formation, moving through their routine with precision that would have seemed impossible before Devon arrived. Devon herself was in the corner on her mat, doing a simple neck roll. Just a basic mobility exercise, nothing special. All 50 cubs stopped their practice and turned to watch her. Devon froze. No, this is just a neck stretch. Very simple, very boring, not interesting at all. The lead cub chirped and tilted its head, studying the movement. Don't even think about it, Devon said. This is just for relaxing tension. You can't weaponize neck mobility. I watched as every cub in the room slowly, experimentally rolled its head in a circle. Devon looked up at me through the observation window with an expression of pure despair. I activated the calm. Do you need me to intervene? Can you stop them from having ideas? Not within my power, I'm afraid. She sighed and returned to her mat. When they invent a martial art technique based on neck stretches, I'm requesting a transfer. Noted. I'll have the forms ready. As I walked away, I heard the lead cub vocalize a new term. Circle sight all paths. Devon's groan echoed through the calm system. I filed my daily report, flagged it as routine, and added a note that Devon might need additional stress management support, though given what her stress management techniques had already created, I wasn't sure if that would help or make things worse. Somewhere in the recreation bay, cubs were probably already developing an advanced combat system based on human stress relief exercises. It was going to be a long assignment.